The Friday GT Sprint Challenge coming to an end in just 2 weeks, the penultimate round here in Misano, Italy. Points still on the table, a championship still up for grabs. Hello, everybody. I'm Jesse Lee, joined by Tim Peck, and for the very first time, Sarah Stant today. We've got Ryan Gill on the cameras for the last time this season, and boy, it's shaping up to be an occasion. Welcome in, everyone. Tim Peck, starting with you. Welcome back to the broadcast booth in 2023. And on top of that, you've come in during a hotly contested championship battle.
Thank you, Jesse. It is very good to be back in the booth. I'm interested to see what the battle's looking like. You gave me a quick rundown before we started today about what's happening on the track, but I'm excited to see them all battling out. I hear Valentin Barrier has been coming back as the championship goes on. Hugo Morales is sitting around in third, and as I've heard it, Dylan Tan currently leading the championship.
Sure is. And of course, they had a bigger championship lead after 3 round Spa, not quite going their way. We'll cover all that and more after the results of qualifying today. We'll show you where everybody has shaken out thus far. Of course, the penultimate round in the series, a big one. If you've had a great season thus far, you can't allow it to slip away here, can you, Sarah?
Absolutely not, especially with Valentin Barrier choosing to use his Monza as his drop round in the first round there. It's definitely going to be a close race, and I'm really excited to see what it lines up to be.
It is indeed. Sarah, your first broadcast with us here, and welcome in. What do you expect to see today out of a race? I know normally you're the one in the car. Today you're up here in the booth with us. What are you keeping your eye on?
I think one of the things that I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on today is just seeing how drivers handle the long straightaway into the hairpin. Quite often we see a lot of drivers who try to get really tight in on that area, and if they bump another driver off, that driver can end up with a DSQ, and I just want to see nice, clean racing.
I think we all want that. And to that point, we've had some pretty fantastic racing all season. We've had some battles for the lead, and barring a few incidents that you probably could consider to be significant, it's been pretty much by the books, and you love to see it without having to get the stewards too often involved. Of course, we do have our armada of stewards with us as well. Hello to them and hello to all of you on YouTube here this evening. Thank you for spending a little bit of your Friday evening with us here on RCI TV. Qualifying already underway, and Jonathan Seville, the Pulse Sim Sport driver, out in front early. He was the quickest in practice, so no surprise there, but he's just been done by Dylan Tan, a 32.727. Not bad, Tim.
Well, that's the exact start that Dylan Tan's going to want going into this race. Basically, for qualifying, I'm looking mostly at Dylan Tan, Hugo Morales and Valentin Barrier. Whichever one of them comes out on top is likely to have a lot more control as they approach the first corner. But Jesse Lee, 10 minutes of qualifying is not a lot of time to get your best lap out. You get, we say this every time, probably 3-4 laps to do your fastest laps. There's a lot of pressure on all of these drivers to make sure they do their best lap quickly, especially around Misano, where it's very easy to invalidate a lap.
It sure is. Sarah mentioned the disqualification earlier, and I believe, if listening into the stewards earlier, if I'm correct in saying that there is a place where it's quite easy to get disqualified if you have an accident and spin off here. ACC will automatically disqualify you. I believe I heard the stewards say that they would be reversing those disqualifications in the event of an accident that led to a car exceeding the limits of ACC, meaning that they would essentially still lose a lap, but they would be allowed to continue the race. Dylan Tan's quickest lap, Seville, Ogner, Rodikov, Merrills, and Fry, your top 5. Valentin Barrier, the winner from 1 week ago, struggling to get inside the top 5, and in fact, just got misplaced one more spot by Cody Sherritt up to P4. Sarah, we're talking about qualifying here. Is this a track that you particularly worried about qualifying?
I think so as well. There's a lot of room for just small mistakes on this track. To try and get the best possible time out of this track, you have to cut corners with razor thin accuracy. If you go over those bumps, that's an invalid lap, and that's a whole other time around the track before you can even get a chance at getting another shot at it again.
Very good insights. Some tracks are not particularly inhospitable for qualifying, but of course this track with its track limits, I think adds that. I think without the track limits, it wouldn't be quite as daunting of a task. You can absolutely, like Sarah said, ruin a lap immediately around here. Even, you know, it doesn't matter. You're trolling around here for an extra, minute and a half, and nothing you can do about it. That's lost time, and it is only a 10-minute session. Valentin Barrier got a handful coming through sector 3 there this time, but might still be up on their lap here.
Well, here's the thing, Jesse, with Valentin Barrier is, I know we talk about qualifying and how important it is to qualify close to the top. I'm sure you'll agree, I've seen Valentin Barrier do some absolutely amazing climbs during races. They are one that you can count on to always be looking for the overtake. And going back to what you were saying about, is it important to qualify up front here at Misano? I mean, it's always important to be as close to the front as you can, But I'd say Misano is definitely one of those tracks where overtaking possibilities are there quite frequently. You've got quite a lot of long straights coming out of corners where if you get a good exit, then you can really use the top speed of the car to overtake your opponent. So for drivers like Valentin Barrier, Hugo Morales as well, those more aggressive drivers that look for overtakes quite often, I think qualifying, as long as they're in that sort of top half of the field, they should still be okay coming into the race. The only thing they don't want to do is have it so that Dylan Tan is a good couple of drivers ahead of them, and that will give Dylan just a chance to really push their lead. So by the time that Barrier or Morales gets up into that second place, Tan's no longer in their sights anymore.
We haven't talked about the weather. That's simply because there's nothing to complain about. Of course, it is going about 10 p.m. here in sim time at Misano, but 18 degrees C, a light breeze out of the south, I do believe, and very little cloud to speak of. Just about perfect, and everyone using the light, though, of the headlamps of the cars to navigate around the racetrack. Lovely evening, all things considered. Tan did reset. Quickest lap in the 144 McLaren. It's a 32.550. That's 15/100ths quicker than Seville, who very nearly got up there. Valentin Barrier came back across the line. He was down in 7th or 8th place. He's up into P3. Hugo Merrill's now 4th. Agner Radikov, your top 5. Sir, it's picking up here. Is that something you're used to seeing late in the session?
Yeah, definitely, because I mean, as a track starts to, we get the warming of the track, we get the little bit more comfort with the cars themselves, because, you get right out of qualification, you're a little bit jittery, you kind of got that vibe, like, I gotta do good, I gotta get in that top bit, because I don't want to fight through 20 cars on my way to the front. So overall, I think, yeah, I have to agree.
Anything surprise you as far as manufacturers go? A couple of McLarens up front, a Ferrari, a Honda, and a Mercedes. Porsche languishing a little bit down in 8th place. Any of that surprising?
I think the biggest surprise on that is the lack of Hondas. The BOP changes they made to the Honda really having an effect on the amount we see. Because before, in previous series, we were seeing almost half the grid approaching Hondas. Also, the sheer amount of McLarens we're seeing is quite impressive as well.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't have pegged the McLarens as, well, they have 4 of them inside the top 10 right now, and one of them just moved up. I believe that was Patterson that moved up a spot. That might have been Cody Sherritt who moved up into 6th, but nevertheless, they're creeping ever closer to the top of the pylon. I also share that sentiment. I am surprised. Valentin Barrier down into 4th place, qualifying over, all flying laps count. Nearly half the field already in the pit lane. Agner Radikov in 5th place, and that's where they will stay for the time being. Hugo Merrill's coming to the line in the John Lacey Esports Academy car. A little bit of a twitch there on the curb. I think that's going to be just fine. Is an improvement. He needs a 1/4 of a second. He won't get it, but he will make an improvement, at least for a few 100ths. Tim?
Yeah, I mean, that is more or less how I expected this qualifying to go. Dylan Tan on top currently. I don't think there's many people out on the track right now that can really hold him against that, but Jonathan Seville in 2nd place there. That's a great start for Seville, really helped them down into turn 1 to keep up with the front of the pack. Hugo Morales and Valentin Barrier finding themselves in 3rd and 4th. Like I was saying, Jesse, it's a great start for them. It puts them towards the front, but they are going to have to clear Seville very quickly if they want to bring the fight to Dylan Tan in the later stages of the race.
Well, qualifying sorted, and bonus points to the top qualifying driver, and that may be of very much importance as we come to the close of the championship next Friday. But, well, we've had 4 races up to this point. Let's show you the championship standings and how they've shaken out thus far. Obviously, the pro field, and only the pro field. Dylan Tan stands out amongst everyone in the 144 car. They've got 206 points to their name. Valentin Barrier, with the impressive win at Spa last week, put themselves back into championship competition here, 178 points. Right behind them, Hugo Merrill's 164 points, rounds out your podium. Judah Savalainen in 4th place, 142. 1 point behind them, Samir Foch rounding out the top 5. Cody Sherritt in 6th place, 140 points, just 1 point behind them as well. A tightly contested battle for fourth, I think we could all agree. Jonathan Seville in seventh place, 121 points. Igor Ognarodikov, 93 points, tied with Solensev for eighth place. And rounding out the top 10, Alessio Mellis with 89. Take it away, Tim.
So here is how things are in the next half of the top 20. You got Peter O'Brien in 11th place. They have 76 points. Just 2 points behind them is Soldatov in the 991. They're in 12th. Billen in the 183. They are in 13th place with 67 points. And just behind them is Patterson in the 123 car. They're in 14th. Rattiani is in 15th place. They have 54 points, and just 1 point behind them is both John Eraser and Joshua Allen. They are holding 16th place, respectively. Thomas Ehrentraut down in 18th place. They have 48 points. Just behind them is Kubacki with 47 points. They're in 19th, and Jordan Daly will round out the top 20.
Outside the top 20, looks a little something like this. Michael Herman Fry, 35 points, 1 point in front of John Gohan in 22nd place. 2 points behind them, Jan Klimes in 23rd with 32 points. Sebastian Louis Alexander on 27, Sasha Death on 26 is the top 25. Ayorton Stefano on 25 points. And Ufriev doesn't have any points in the championship thus far. And everyone with a dash instead of a numeric value has retired from the championship. You know, it's very close from top to bottom. How many times do we get to the end of a championship like this? And there are drivers and teams that are struggling, or not struggling, but they're striving to just get 1 point because it matters. Sarah, a point makes a difference. A point can make a difference between finishing seventh or finishing third or fourth in this championship.
It's such a tight championship. Like, when you're dealing with pro drivers and these really, really narrow times, I mean, look at the times here. We have the fastest driver is in at a 32.5, and the absolute slowest is only a 34.9. That last place driver is, with a good race, could easily find themselves in the upper half of the thing and gaining points and managing to pull themselves up the ranks.
It's a good point, and something we really haven't mentioned thus far. This is Misano. This is a track where you lose a ton of time battling, defending. Any of that loses tenths of on any given corner, and you're battling for an entire lap. You're losing seconds doing so. We've seen that come into play before. Don't be surprised if 2 cars battling turns into 3, turns into 4, turns into 5. It's the old train effect that we're used to seeing, Tim.
It is, and I imagine one of those fights is going to start very, very early. Seville starting in that second place spot. They're currently, I think, 7th in the championship. So not in that fight for the top overall, but as they've shown so far in qualifying, they definitely have the pace to be up there today because all of their laps were competitive, I will say, with Dylan Tan. So I think Hugo Morales, Valentin Barrier, as they're chasing those points to try and overtake Dylan Tan in the championship, Seville is going to be one of the harder drivers today that they're going to have to cross. And if Seville does a good job of defending here, if they're aware of where the drivers behind are at all times and really hold on to it in the first couple of laps, they might just buy themselves enough time to give themselves a couple of seconds distance, and then hopefully they can hold on to that second place until the later stages of the race.
One thing interesting about the timing sheet from the results of qualifying, the fastest qualifier, Dylan Tan, did not have the quickest sector in any sector. In fact, nobody inside the top 2 or 3 did. They were all spread amongst the drivers just outside of that. So let that be a lesson to any young sim racers at home. You don't have to be the quickest in general in any given sector. You just got to be the quickest overall. Dylan Tan exemplifies that. Didn't set a single purple sector, didn't matter, was better than all of them over the average of the lap. 20 cars ready to go green today. Just a reminder of the rules. 1 hour and 5 minutes, 65 minutes, a pit stop required tonight. That's what the amber number 1 means. They are required to take 1 liter of fuel, but they must also be stationary in the pit box for 25 seconds. What you do with that time, rather up to you. 5 extra seconds stationary gets you tire change. And I think more than anywhere tonight, I don't think anyone will go for 25. I think everyone will take the 5-second penalty, if you will, and take the tires. Your thoughts, Tim?
I mean, it's always interesting when it comes down to the pit stops, what strategies people take. We've seen both work out in the past, where that extra 5 seconds gives you just enough distance on track to hold on to that lead. I'm thinking back to when Jardier in particular did it. They got ahead with that by not taking the extra set of tyres and managed to then defend until the end of the race. I believe it's Watkins Glen that they did it on. They just defended until the end of the race because they had the extra 5 seconds. But that being said, it is undeniable that a fresh set of tyres gives you so much more pace around the track. It keeps kind of stuck to the track well. And when you're trying not to make track cuts, a fresh set of tyres, it might not make it ensured that it's going to be perfect, but it's certainly going to help you not slide anywhere you don't want to be or lose a bit of grip that's going to send you too tight to the corner. So in my opinion today, I'd say that the call is to take the fresh set of tyres. Sarah, what do you think?
I do agree. That extra set of tires, while it may make it a little bit more slippery around the first couple laps, it's definitely going to pay off with the long-term grip and the ability just to scoot past any driver who decides to make the decision to not take fresh tires.
I'm outvoted in the booth today. Now that is very interesting indeed. See, I would have been on the wrong strategy. I know who I'm hiring next time. I need a crew chief and an engineer for the next race. I think you guys might be onto something here, and I might be incorrect. Before we get going today, a big thank you to our partners that make this race and every race possible. AK Esports, Driver 61, Fanatec, Digital Motorsports, and Go Setups. We'll hear a little bit more about those fine folks after the checkered flag tonight, and I mean that literally because it's after 9 p.m. in sim time, and we are going racing. We are racing into the darkness. Sarah, what are some things to look out for racing at night around here?
Well, actually, one of the things that's really quite interesting about Misano is in its recent redesign from its original feeling as just a MotoGP track, being able to kind of develop this GT racing, they actually installed a lot of lights on the track. So you're going to have to get used to going from light to dark as you travel throughout the track.
Well, there you go. You can see the stadium floodlighting on display here. It's not quite precursory yet, but we will see as we get going. 20 cars lined up 2 by 2, 10 rows deep, waiting for the green flag. There it is, the flagman, Dylan Tan, your championship leader and pole sitter, comes across the nose of Seville, gets in there and gets down as they're fighting for third place. Merrill's and Barrier fighting over that spot. They're still neck and neck, 3 wide, further back into the pack. Almost no major contact as far as I'm aware, as they almost all get away cleanly. 1 car off, the pink car rejoins without further incident. That was a very nice start.
I mean, Dylan Tanner just got the dream of starts. They managed to pull ahead, several just tucked in behind them, probably to avoid instant as well going to that first corner, and all together they went through fairly cleanly. We saw Hugo and Rails there. They made a move on Valentin Barry, actually. I think they might have started ahead anyway. We saw them hang around the outside. Oh, what's happened there, Jesse?
There's a little bit of side-by-side contact, I'm afraid, and I think the inside car got the worst end of the stick on that one, because they were the car that went around. That might have been Peter O'Brien, and that is not exactly the way you wanted the race to start. That was the car that went off the track into turn 3, but I'm afraid it's gone a little bit more wrong for the O'Brien racing car so far here. Sarah, did you happen to catch what happened?
It looks like going into the corner there, one of the cars just carried a little bit too much speed and went at the back end. Oh, it looks like we have another car up the track. Oh, that was very close.
Oh,
drivers have to be a lot more aware when they're coming back onto the track. It's so easy to slide into another car and not only your own race, but somebody else's as well.
I was just going to say, I agree. The stewards are probably not going to appreciate that rejoin. That might have been a bit scary for everybody involved. Our Duradikov was running inside the top 5 down into P10 and trying not to drop any further positions. Dylan Tan leads by 1.2 seconds, already gapping Seville in the 97. Hugo Merrill's making a run of it for P2 for the moment, but scary moments here. They got through the first couple of corners, but it got crazy. And well, we'll hopefully see if they are able to calm it down just a little bit, as they are now single file. But the question is, Tim, for how long?
I think it's going to be this way for a lap or so now. Usually, Jesse, we see that mad first dash at the beginning. Scratch what I just said, the Mercedes now looking down the inside of the corner, neck and neck with the Aston Martin. Looks like they're going to take that position easily there. That will be the Mercedes promoted up into 9th place. A great textbook overtake there, and that just removes everything I was about to say, Jesse, where usually you have that mad rush at the beginning, everyone's trying to scramble places, then there's a slight bit of calm for a couple of laps, and then once you sort of, you know what your pace is like compared to others, that's when the attacking starts to happen. Usually. This case, however, it looks like a couple of cars, Hugo Morales being one of them now, and Valentin Barrier, who's found them way up into 3rd place. They're looking to try and make things happen early.
Well, let us remind you what's at stake here. Barrier really needs to finish ahead of Dylan Tan, and that's going to prove a tall task if they're going to be as quick as they've been all weekend thus far. Barrier cannot afford, at the very least, to drop this spot to Hugo Morales. Morales also in 3rd place in the championship, fighting for themselves. They don't really care about Barrier standing. Hugo still thinks that if they get up there in battle, they have a shot, and certainly they do, but not if the trend continues. That trend, Dylan Tan leading the race and now has the magenta number 1, the fastest lap of the race. And that is not good news if you're anybody behind them, Sarah.
Absolutely not. Dylan Tan has been absolutely dominating this series from, seems like, nearly day one. They're able to take all of these corners with just that precision of a driver that obviously spends hundreds of hours, lap after lap in that seat, making sure they know every corner on these tracks, because that's really what it all comes down to, seat time.
That's a very good point. Dylan Tan has had a couple of races where he's not won this season, of course, but he's never been very far away from the top step of the podium, and that is, of course, why he is in firm control of the championship. Somebody else is going to have to make it work to dethrone him this late into the season. Now, keep in mind, Dylan Tan would get a drive-through penalty, something goes wrong in their world, I'm completely changing my tune, and this thing is absolutely wide open, but for the time being, Dylan Tan doing an excellent job. Igor Radikov, remember, off the racetrack. We don't know exactly how they ended up that far off the racetrack and ended up down in P10. They've gained 1 spot back, the Simware.Pro driver. Busy hands there, and if memory serves, they might currently have the fastest lap, because I don't see one, and we're looking at the car, leading me to believe they might have the fastest lap right now. They're on a mission, Tim.
They certainly are. They fell at the beginning, they started to climb back up, and now they've got a lot more cars to climb through. I'm just looking at the average lap times here, Jesse, across the sort of field, and what I'm seeing is towards the front where you've got Tan and Seville, they've got these great lap times, but you do have to wonder how they're getting them in particular. Not just because it looks dodgy as Seville there just gets the fastest lap, but like we said, there's a lot of places you can cut the track on this track, and you do have to think, how safe are these drivers going to be? You've got an hour and 5 minutes of race time. You can't afford to get loads of track cuts early on, especially if it means drive through later. So the big question for me is, drivers like Valentin Barrier, Hugo Morales, are they hanging back to avoid those track cuts? Is Tan and Seville maybe picking up a few early on? These are things that we can't predict just yet, but will be a lot more clearer how it's turned out as we get later onto the race here. But from what I've seen so far, I believe Valentin Barrier and Hugo Morales, they just need to get a bit more quick to the track. Who is facing the wrong way there? Is that Hugo Morales?
That might be Ayrton Stefano, the Argentine driver, and that is the 3rd or 4th time this season that we've unfortunately seen them backwards. Now, I'm curious if that was contact or not, but that was a heck of a good rejoin. Very patient. It's so easy to want to rejoin as quickly as possible and absolutely make a bigger issue, but nothing doing there. They were able to get the car going, but I will go back to the previous point. I'm going to ask you both. We'll start with Sarah. We'll go to Tim. How many cars get a drive-through for track limits tonight? We always tend to play this game around here because it is so prevalent. We'll start with Sarah. We'll go to Tim. Your thoughts?
You know, I like to hope that, dealing with pro drivers here, that we're going to have a minimal amount, but pro drivers are also the kind of people who are going to try to take every little edge they can out of it. So my guess is probably 3 or 4.
20. No, probably, I'd have to agree with Sarah there. Probably around the same. I'd say, based on previous experiences watching this track, probably around 3 or 4. I wouldn't be surprised though if it was either more or less. It's one of those things, Jesse, that is really hard to predict. But I'm with Sarah again on this one, 3 or 4. What about you?
All I'm going to say is, for any drivers in the race tonight, after hearing Tim Peck say that about you, Tim Peck drives a 2011 red Vauxhall Astra, and you can find him in the parking lot on the way out tonight. Just absolutely incredible. I'm going to say, and you know how I love to play devil's advocate, I'm going to take the under. I think there's only going to be one drive-through penalty tonight. I'm feeling a bit feisty.
Yeah, but who is it?
I'm not. I can't. See, I can't. I can't say that now because we don't need to cause any alarm, more than we already have tonight. But I think there will be just the one. There is a nice cat and mouse game happening up at the front of this field. It is a silent war, if you will. Jonathan Seville had the quickest laps for a few laps and has closed the gap. It was nearly 2 seconds at one point, and now Dylan Tan has taken the fastest lap back, but the gap is now 1.2 seconds. Very close stuff as Michael Herman Fry, the HRF Motorsport car, trying to go around the outside, might have a look up the inside. In fact, they will take a look, but gets closed off by Konstantin Solotov. Down the inside again is Fry. Nothing doing that time as well. Nice, respectful battle back and forth here between two very different machines, Tim.
Yeah, Fry is really trying to line this up right now. They went for the switchback coming around the corner, didn't quite work out, and it all comes down to the choice of car. We were mentioning about the Porsche being low down in qualifying, Jesse. It's one of those tracks that the Porsche does tend to struggle on, just because there's a lot of long straights and the straight line speed on the Porsche just isn't that great. So Fry here has got a lot of work to do if they do want to make this overtake happen. But I mean, we'll see if it can. I've got quite a lot of confidence in this Porsche. Fry has looked very tactical the last couple of laps there. He's going quite wide there on the corner. Yeah, and that is probably going to be a track cut for the number 181.
I would like to change my answer for the number of drive-throughs that we're going to see, if that's how it's going to be. I think you both probably got closer than I did. I just feel, I felt at the time that perhaps they were going to better mind the track limits, but after seeing that, maybe not the case. Sarah, we're going to teach you a live lesson on broadcasting of any kind. Do you know how we saw the initial start of the race and we thought that it was mostly clean? Yeah, that's a trick of the cameras, I'm afraid. The stewards disagree. They said that they had quite a few things to work out. So lesson number 1 on the job, just because we don't see it doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Yes, that's always a great lesson to learn. Thank you so much.
It is true, though. The stewards have told us that there were more than a couple of incidents. We will bring you the conclusion of those when they are present to us. So far, it's been a good race up front. A couple of cars have had early spins out, and we have, to our knowledge, the vast majority of them have been self-inflicted. Sarah, is grip an issue around this racetrack?
Absolutely. It's fairly well known Misano has its mixtures of on and off camber turns. They like to throw you in and throw you out. It's deceptively like a roller coaster despite being a very flat track. You know, we've seen Stefano go from a fairly high position all the way to the back. We've also seen other drivers having trouble maintaining lines and bumping each other off the track. It's just kind of one of those examples, like the turn we're facing right here is a good example of one of those turns that just likes to throw you to the side if you're not careful.
Well, I will say, in addition to all of the things that we usually get wrong in the booth, I think it's only rightful that Tim and I ask a driver that's in the wars every single week. And we talk about, we've talked about every week on this broadcast, the difference between a 60-minute race and a 65-minute race and what that does to you mentally. And most drivers in a league setting, they're racing for an hour, adding 5 minutes, and usually it's 5 minutes plus whatever lap is left, obviously. That does something to a driver mentally, or at least we assume that. Can you expand upon that? Does that change your mentality at all, racing for an additional 5 minutes versus what most people are used to racing for an hour?
Absolutely. That little bit of extra time, it's just, you get to the end of the hour, you're drenched in sweat, you know, your legs are tired, and you look up at that little timer and you're like, there's still 5 more minutes left. My tires are starting to go a little sloppy again. Oh, we just about had a slide off of 188 there. That's Michael Herman Fry. An example, like even at the very beginning, if you're slipping and sliding at this point, what's it going to be like after 60 minutes? It's going to be a long race today.
Well, folks, we finally got one right in the booth. Mark it down. The 10th of February, 2023. We actually got one right. My prior experience is just, no matter what the length of the race is that you normally run, if you add just a little bit of time, you become more aware of it. And I was curious if that translated to ACC. Apparently, it can too. Herman Fry has had we'll call it an adventurous last couple of laps. They are wringing the neck out of that Porsche.
They are desperate to get through here. They clearly have the overall pace around the track. The problem is, Jesse, is they just don't have enough coming out the corners to overtake the Aston Martin there. The 991 Solstov has just done a great job at defending, making sure they park themselves in the middle of each corner, making sure they're still getting the best exits possible, and that has just helped to keep the Porsche behind. And now Melis in the Ferrari, they're now in the fight as well, and they're putting pressure on Fry. That's just going to make it harder for Fry to get the overtake.
It's going to make it harder as well. It's going to do damage to the tires of the Porsche. I think we can all agree as well, driving it that hard off the rear as they are doing, and it just starts to become a compounding issue at that point. You go back to the tire argument. Is 5 seconds worth it? It might be. If you're doing this much damage or perceiving to do this much damage to the tires, it might be worth doing. The gap between the leaders was down to 1.2. It's up to 1.5. Dylan Tan just chipping away a little bit every lap. No threat from behind. Valentin Berrier solidly in third place. The Hugo Merrill's fight has dissipated quite a bit. It's 2.1 seconds back to the Ferrari, and Samir Foch another second behind them for the top 5. Kieran Patterson, by the way, the 123, was on the back of Cody Sherritt for 6th place at the time, and Michael Herman Fry, of course, continuing to try and get by Soldatov to go up and join Patterson and Ogrodikov, who are all fighting over 6, and that might have been another track cut, Sarah.
Absolutely. Going off into the little side, like into the weeds there, is just going to cost you more time. This Porsche here has been sliding left and right, up and down this whole race here. You can already see starting to get overtaken there by the number 15 Ferrari. I think we could expect to see this driver slip down 1 or 2 positions throughout this race, because I know it's terrible, but the Porsche on this track is always going to have troubles. Its back engine causes it to slide into some of these kind of turns. I hope he proves me wrong.
Huge drama on the racetrack. Huge drama coming out of the stewarding boxes. A huge slide from Michael Herman Fry there again, but that isn't what I'm referring to. Warning for car 991 for squeezing car 123. Causing avoidable contact out on lap 1, turn 2. 5-second penalty for car 29 for moving under braking, causing avoidable contact with car 247. No further action between the 16 to the 188. Drive-through penalty for car 39 for taking out car 98. No position returned. Racing incident between the 181 and the 15. Tim Peck, you're squeaking. That means they're getting close on the track.
Sorry, Jesse. Fry there made one overtake attempt earlier on in the lap, didn't work out, and then there just went wide on the final corner, getting himself a drive-through penalty. So that'll be the first one for track limits, I believe. But Fry there will be the first to pick up a drive-through penalty. We were talking about that Porsche and the likelihood of it, because they did seem to spend an awful lot of time there just running wide. Didn't look overly in control of the car. Do we think, Sarah, that is just due to the fact that their tyres are already starting to show a bit of wear, or is it just Fry struggling to get into the track, get into the rhythm of it early on in the race?
Once you lose that bit of grip with the Porsche tires, they're just going to continue to compound into each other. And I also do want to point out, we actually have 2 drive-throughs right now on the board. We also have a drive-through for Sherrod as well.
Yes, of course, Cody's penalty, I believe, was for the contact with Ayrton Stefano earlier on in the race. That caused the drive-through, and Cody Sherritt has retired that car from the race. The drive-through for Michael Herman Fry, that is for what we were all worried about. That is an ACC-assigned penalty for track limits. Already in the first 15 minutes of the race, our first drive-through. That's not looking good for my prediction.
It's not looking great, but who knows? Maybe one drive-through on the board, that's what makes everyone else start to drive a bit safer. And I have seen it in the past, to be fair, where you get that one drive-through going through after we've seen a lot of track cuts on track, and it suddenly seems that no one else wants to cut the track anymore. But I'd say if the drive-throughs are going to happen, Jesse, they're going to happen in this part of the race. If you get into that second half, the chance of a track cut is a lot less because everyone's going to be paying a lot more attention to it. They're going to be driving a lot safer. As these gaps get bigger as well, they've got a lot more leeway to not cut so many corners whilst trying to fight. So I think if the drive-throughs are going to happen, they're definitely going to happen now. Unfortunately for Fry, it has, but for the other drivers, that might just be what they need to watch where they're going on the track a little bit and think, okay, maybe it's time I back off, don't get the drive-through, otherwise I'm going to be at the back with Fry in the Porsche.
Well, what do you do in this case? If you are Michael Herman Fry, you have a car that's clearly able to contend way up inside the top 10 of this race, and you've been driving the literal wheels off of the race car thus far into the race, trying to make up time, trying to grab any sort of advantage you possibly can to make up for the straight line, lack of straight line speed, I should say, in the Porsche. Now what do, Sarah? If you've got a drive through, you've served that, but now you still have to do your mandatory stop. You're behind the field. Do you just keep going as hard as you possibly can? Does that change the strategy? What do you do?
My advice in those kind of situations is keep your head down, drive a clean race, drive hard, but don't drive the wheels off your car anymore because you're just going to keep giving yourself drive-throughs and that's going to set you back more. Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. That's something you just really got to adhere to when it comes to racing. Too many people try to cut these corners too hard, cost them, way more than they would ever gain from just a little smidge of a corner. It's not worth the 0.01 on your lap time when you give yourself a 45-second thing. Wow, that was a little bit spicy. I'll let that take over from you guys.
Tim Peck, what on earth happened there? It looked like near contact coming out of the fifth turn.
I believe that was Climbs looking for a move around the inside of the fifth turn. I only caught the end of it. We just sort of caught a glimpse of that purple car there, but I believe Climbs went for a move down the inside there of the BMW, Jesse, and just not quite able to do it. Then lost control of the car slightly. That caused the rear to slip out, and it made it look like it was going to be a slight collision, but both drivers able to keep it out of each other. Although Climbs will now fall back, they've got an opportunity to close that gap up once again and go for an attack later on.
Do keep in mind, this driver, Peter O'Brien, in the O'Brien Racing number 16 McLaren, that car was the first car to have issues, remember, in the fourth, fifth turn somewhere. And they have clawed back a couple of positions. They are not done battling today. Their next driver they will have to eventually deal with is Ayrton Stefano in 15th place. So from 20th place, almost back inside the top 15. A little bit of work to go, obviously, but certainly coming back in the right way, Sarah.
Stefano has shown early on in the race that he can really contest with some of the upper people there. He's definitely pushing himself back up through those numbers, and I'm definitely think I'm going to keep an eye on him today. I think he has a bit of an opportunity to make up some real points this time.
Yes, indeed. We'll keep a close eye on the drivers just around the top 15. They all have that ability. And also, too, keep in mind, strategy to me, I always felt like if you're in the middle or the back of the pack, your strategy matters more. You also have more leeway on what you can and can't do. You can get a bit more adventurous with what you do with your pit strategy, i.e. when you pit, what you do when you pit, things like that. I almost like having that extra flexibility more, Tim.
In a way, yes, it's nice having the extra flexibility because, like you said, you can decide exactly what you want to do. You can also force other drivers to do things that maybe is outside of their original strategy, but you also have the extra pressure of having to get it right. Because at the end of the day, that's the thing. When it comes down to strategy, you need to know exactly what you're doing to the point where you get it perfect, because if you do the wrong strategy, that can really damage your race as well. We've seen hundreds of times people either they pit too early, they pit too late, they push early, and then it really bites them later on. You have to get it perfect, and that is a lot of pressure for some of the cars at the back to have here, especially when you're also just trying to race as well. So whilst I say it's definitely nice to be the one in control of all the strategy and all the decisions, you want to be in that position where you're forcing what the other cars have to do. You have to make sure that you are 100% certain you are getting it right.
Speaking of getting it right, remember Igor Ognarodikov, we don't know if they got sent off the racetrack or just missed the corner, but either way, they were in the weeds here early on, and they went back to P10. They are right in the back of Kieran Patterson. That is the rear wing of the PWSR car. Looking back at Ognarodikov, they're almost back to where they started to begin with, battling for 6th place, sir.
I think it's going to be definitely an interesting with Ognarodikov here. He's the only AMG on the track right now, so he's showing us the example of that amazing straight line speed of that thing. Look here, he's almost just kissing the back of that car while still managing to kind of make up time on it. Absolutely amazing.
Covering the inside was Patterson there. Ognarodikov trying to go around the long way, got fully alongside and through the elbow there, just barely beat out by Patterson using the defensive line. Excellent driving by Kieran, excellent driving by Igor. They're both going for it, and they're doing it in a very respectful way. Very difficult part of the racetrack. If either of those cars bobbled, that would have been a huge crash, but well held by both and very nicely kept clean. Now Ognarodikov will likely get another shot at that on this lap. What accordions out does usually come back together. What do you think, Tim? Sell him a dummy and go up the inside this time?
I mean, I'd say, yeah, you just got to find where it works for you. I think what Ognarodikov needs to do right now is they need to work out where they are gaining the most potential on Patterson ahead. Where is it that Mercedes is really pulling through more than the McLaren? Because I can tell you now, it is not going to be going into the corners. That McLaren is always going to have the edge when it comes to the brake. That they'll be able to brake a lot deeper into the corner and a lot harder, making sure they're on it at the last second. So if I'm the one driving the Mercedes right now, I'm looking at what happens coming out of the corner, really making sure that I get the best exit possible and trying to have it happen on the straight. I know that's a lot easier said than done, but that's probably the best way forward for the number 41 right now. They do also have the option to take the pit stop without changing the tyres, get the extra 5 seconds, but like we've said several times already, you're going to have really bad tyres towards the end of the race. You're going to be struggling with them as Jan Climbs here fighting off Alexander. Actually, it's the other way around. The BMW is fighting off Jan Climbs as they go for a move down towards the inside of the corner. Can Climbs get on the brakes a little bit later? No, it looks like the BMW is going to remain ahead on this one, but Climbs there itching to get through still in that Porsche.
Nobody has done their mandatory stop, and that's in line with what we've seen for the majority of this season. A couple of seasons ago in the GT Sprint Challenge, you might have seen a couple of cars come in immediately, come in early, and get the stop done. Not this season. Season 9, I believe we're on. Almost exclusively, the entire field comes in around the halfway point of the race, which is not at the 30-minute mark. Reminder, this is a 65-minute race, so we are not far off from when that window would open if they're going to continue that pattern. And speaking of pattern, that was a very nice move that just very nearly came off. Didn't. Everybody resets back to not. We're going to do it again. And Louis Alexander lives to fight another day in P12 as the cars behind him continue to grow. You've got Jan Climbs and Sasha Death joining the fight here, all looking for that P12, Sarah.
This is probably going to be one of the fights that we're going to be watching for quite a bit here. The BMW is definitely a little bit slower through the corners than the Porsche is, but that Porsche straight line speed is really showing just how weak it is at Misano. I'm definitely excited to see how this plays out, but what I'm also excited here is how O'Brien has managed to climb up to 16th. And also, we have another drive-through here as well. Car number 29 seems to have earned a drive-through. I'm not sure if that's for a penalty or if they've managed to give themselves a track limits drive-through. Can we get an update on that?
That is a good question. I saw Rattiani's penalty earlier, and it's not showing up on the list, so I do worry that that might be a drive-through penalty. And here we go, the first pit stops of the race. That is a very spirited pit in there, not wasting any time from Jan Climbs in the Verva Racing Porsche, as their end in front of them you didn't see Alessio Mellis in the number 15 Ferrari, but they have also come in. Those are the only two takers on that lap. I tell a lie, Michael Herman Fry is in as well. Remember, they had a drive-through for track limits, but they are doing their mandatory stop now. Everybody else stayed out, but that is the opening, and right on schedule, mind you, Tim, for when we normally see, or we have normally seen this season, the pit window open where everyone assumes it is the best time to pit.
Yeah, I'm expecting most pit stops to happen now within this 5-minute window, from that 37 mark down to the 32 minutes left. However, I'm interested to really see here what Climbs is going to do in that Porsche. We know that they've got quite a lot of pace on the track. Unfortunately, they're struggling to overtake with the lack of straight line speed. I'm wondering here, do they not take the fresh set of tyres? I mean, it's really going to damage them later on, especially because that car's already been sliding around like many others. But that extra 5 seconds could be enough to put them ahead of the BMW and the Aston Martin that they were starting to get quite swallowed up by. So I'm interested to know what Climbs does here, what their strategy is. I think, however, they just took the new pair of tyres, which, again, go back to what I said at the start of the race, it's the safest option. We've seen so many cars already sliding around today, and as long as you're not having an incident, that's a good result.
Well, I just saw Rattiani, who has a drive-through already and still has a pit stop to give, a mandatory stop that is. Their day has continued to worsen. They were just shy of the Curva del Caro at the top of the circuit, and they spun. That looked to be a single-car incident, and that has further placated their day as they will come down to the pit lane. And, well, I think they have they technically have an option. You could do your penalty and then your mandatory stop on subsequent laps, and if you have enough laps left you could do it the other way around, and we'll see. But I'm pretty sure the 29 Rattiani has retired that car, and an unfortunate retirement happening there. More cars down the pit lane. Peter O'Brien on a recovery drive down the pit lane. Nothing too crazy happening on the pit stops that we can report to you. Everything looks like it went fine for the first cycle. Surprised though, Sarah, not more people have come in since then.
It's really surprising. Usually when we first see a car come into the pit, that kind of starts a cascade of other drivers having that fear of missing out, the old FOMO. They don't want to be that last car in because they don't want to be the tire that kind of slides off the track glass. It's a risky choice to be the last one coming in. I've been there before. You never want to be that person.
I will ask, were you typically, I want to pit early and try to undercut people? Did you try the overcut? What did you find typically in general worked better for you?
I feel like I'm still working on kind of developing that, but I think the biggest one for me I find is just find that happy medium where your driving is. Don't rely on other drivers to decide when you choose to pit. Build your strategy, figure out how the car feels. If the car's sliding, your tires have gone to shit, go into pit earlier. Oh, pardon me. Your tires have gone bad. Make sure you just come in early. You get those fresh tires out there. You're going to have a much better time than if you try to push yourself on tires that have gotten flat spots, blistering, graining. It's just not a great time.
I assume Tim and I are very different in that regard. I'm pretty sure we turn into, like, you know the Muppets characters? Whenever, Kermit, when they freak out, when they see other people pit, oh, I gotta come in now. I'm pretty sure that's what Tim and I do. Tim, correct me if I'm wrong about that.
I mean, you know me, Jesse. I'm a big fan of the undercut. I'm a pit early type of person, and suffer later on, so be it. I like to more force the people around me to pit and see what I can do, because the other thing is, if you pit slightly earlier, you've got fresh tires. Yes, you've got a bit more fuel, but you have that sort of nice bit where you've got those fresh tires, and hopefully that will just be enough to undercut, get in front of the car. If not, then you'll still be close to them when you come out the pits, and that'll be enough with warm tires to hopefully get an overtake off on them, and then you'll have slightly less fuel as well to do it. So I do like pitting slightly earlier. That being said, if someone pits earlier than me, I am exactly like you. I start to panic and think, oh my gosh, how do I like deal with the situation? Do I need to pit now, or do I stick to my plan? So I think I need a bit more, what's the word? Like resistance, like Sarah, like some self-discipline to say, okay, just stick to your own strategy here. Don't mess it up because someone else has pitted earlier than you, because the earlier you pit, you're right, Jesse, the earlier you pit, the more likely your tyres are to not be so great towards the end of the race, and that can really affect your performance later on. It could just be enough to let your opponent get you in those last few seconds.
Barrier down the pit lane, Aaron Trout, Aaron Stefano into the pit lane. That will be right around half of the cars in the race coming down the pit lane. I thought I saw a slow car down the inside, and there might have been, just letting some of the other traffic through. We saw for a moment Sasha Death, who was closing in on Louis Alexander, and that's because, of course, you'll recall Jan Climbs, the first pitter to come in, and that released Sasha Death for the time being, but more cars coming in this time. Second place, Jonathan Seville is in, Hugo Merrils is in, Igor Agnorodikov is also in the pit lane as well. More cars coming in behind. I believe that's Konstantin Soldatov in the Aston coming in as well. The next group is a turn or two behind. We'll see if they continue to come in. Usually speaking, when some of the top drivers come in, that does ring the dinner bell, but no, still going around more is Sebastian, Louis Alexander, Sasha Death, and the like. Nobody else coming in, nobody else taking the bait here. They're going to go a little bit longer than everybody else. A little bit of a split decision here this week, Sarah.
Absolutely. Especially when you're in the back of the grid there, you really want to try to push your car to exactly where you feel is just right. Like, again, we're just echoing the discipline. When you're not in that top kind of bit, that's the number one thing you can work on, is just making sure you maintain your strategy, maintain your lines. Don't try to try new things during the race. Don't try to develop, your new turn strategy halfway through the race, because what's going to happen is you're going to get it once, maybe you're going to get it twice, but then you're going to have a moment. Also, great overtake by Sasha Death there. Just absolutely great job overtaking, I think that was Louis Alexander. Absolutely great. Sorry, I lost the key there. But back to you.
Sorry about that. I was just checking some of the pit stop time, seeing if anyone has done the no tyre change strategy, and I believe there may be some across the field, but I can't confirm it yet. We'll definitely find out later on, though, depending on who is sliding around the track. But yes, a beautiful overtake there from Sasha Death, managing to get through the BMW quickly down the inside. It was a great move, and again, I'm just going to go back to what we were talking about with pit stops and why these drivers are still out. Yes, you've got to have that discipline, like you were saying earlier, Sasha, about making sure you don't let other people affect your strategy, but also on the flip side of that, if your opponent's pitting before you, you've got a chance to make the most of that. Like, let's say the person you're directly fighting pits, you've then got a good 3-4 laps where you can absolutely push your car to the limit, especially if you've made sure you've got the fuel for that, and that's what was in your plan. Then you can come out, hopefully the overcut's worked and you've given yourself a bit more time there. You have fresher tyres at the end of the race that will help you to stay ahead as well. And then the overcut there can work out a lot better too. So undercuts, overcuts, or just going in the direct middle of the race, all strategies can be seen to work out. And I expect here, I'm interested in your thoughts, Samir Foch at the front currently, probably looking to just extend their stint as much as possible now with that fresh air ahead of them. No one to hold them up. The 888 Ferrari probably here just looking to get as far ahead as possible before they have to pit.
This is a interesting situation. We've been weighing the changing tires and not changing tires. Well, we can tell you that only 2 cars that we're aware of have changed tires. Aaron Stefano in the 98 has changed tires, and I believe the 481 of Gohan has also changed tires. Nobody else has risked the additional 5 seconds, and I think I have an idea why they haven't done that. They've not changed tires because the gaps weren't big enough in its contact. Jan Climbs and Aaron Trout make contact. Aaron Trout spins off of the racetrack, collects it. Jan Climbs slows down, realizing that he pushed him off the track, and here is the Jesse Lee interpreting the flashing. That was an apology, Sarah.
Absolutely, absolutely. I really love when I see a competitor not just continue to drive on after taking a driver out when it's, sometimes we can't return the position, but it's really important when you're able to return that position, especially because the stewards are going to look at that after, and if it's your fault and you don't return position, you're going to definitely take a penalty that's just not worth driving on.
I can also tell you, Kieran Patterson, in the time that our data has refreshed, Kieran Patterson has taken tires in the pit lane as well. That's dropped them behind Ognarodikov by only 2 seconds. And will that fresher rubber mean something in the final 10 minutes? I would hazard the guess that it will, though it might not matter because Igor Ognarodikov has a drive-through penalty. I see no shuffling in the steward's box, Tim. That can only mean one thing. That is a drive-through penalty for track limits.
Sarah's prediction holds right so far. That is the third drive-through penalty I believe that we've had here. So yeah, I mean, this is more or less where I was expecting this to go as well with drive-through penalties. They sort of sprinkle throughout the race. However, I do think from now on we are less likely to see any more drive-through penalties because everyone's just going to be that bit safer. You can see after the pit stops have happened, a lot of drivers are now a lot more split up in their times to each other. There's a good couple of seconds between everyone other than the pack that is currently trailing the driver we're watching right now. Patterson leads both Melis and Soldatov. They are all still in a fight together. I'm now looking for climbs. Where are they? They're down there, and the BMW's behind them. So is the McLaren, but somehow Ehrentraut and the Aston Martin got ahead. So Climbs, I imagine, who didn't take a fresh set of tyres, has managed to jump Alexandre, but not Ehrentraut.
It's very close stuff. It always shuffles around in the pit cycle. It's interesting to see a mixed strategy as well. Keep your eye specifically on the 123 of Patterson, as they have new rubber. They were 2 seconds behind Ognarodikov. They're only 1.5 now, but of course Ognorodikov's got the better part of 2 laps to come serve that penalty. Sasha Death, who was leading the race there for a few laps, comes in to complete their mandatory pit stop, and that will complete the pit cycle today. That will cycle Tan back out in front of Seville by 2.6 seconds. Barrier, who has the quickest lap of the race currently, is closing in on Seville for second. Now that's important because if Barrier gets by Seville for second, even if he can't catch Dylan Tan, that at least means we have a championship fight on our hands for the final round in 1 week's time. Tim?
That would be exciting if Barrier can get up into that second place. It does, though, mean that Tan has to have a bad result to help Barrier into that championship fight. I think, Jesse, let's be real, looking at Tan's performance across this season, how they've performed today as well, they are looking very, very strong. However, we have seen in the past those drivers, especially going into the final round, do start to struggle a little bit, but Dylan Tan in that McLaren, I mean, they've just been phenomenal so far across the season. Had some great results in every race, not letting it look like they make too many mistakes. And one of the drivers today, I'd say, where we've not seen them go wide in a lot of the corners. I mean, if you think back on some of the drivers we looked at today, there's a couple that have been struggling to get the grip right on the track, especially as the tyres start to wear down. There's a couple who we were predicting would have problems with drive-throughs or track cuts later. I wouldn't say that Dylan Tan is one of those drivers.
Sarah, we have a saying around here is that no matter how strung out the race gets, at the end of every RCI race, it always seems to accordion back together and something happens. I'm curious if that's your experience on the racetrack, and if so, why do you think that is?
There's actually a term for this. It's called the concertina effect. It's something we can actually see both in racing and in traffic. It's quite an interesting effect. Just the bunching up and pulling out of everybody is very much like an accordion. So as one driver maybe makes a little bit of a slip and slows, they slow the driver behind them, it slows the driver behind them, that then eventually causes this kind of compression of the drivers. And then eventually, as time moves on, they start to stretch back out again.
You will notice, folks at home, that Sarah and I have similar accents, meaning that we're from the same continent, essentially, and for you Europeans that do not appreciate it, I will say it. I know you say it, you pronounce it Constantina effect. I know that's how you pronounce it. It is a Constantina effect for us. It is okay. Also, color doesn't have a U in it. Get over it. Moving on. 23
Color does in
minutes.
fact have a U in it.
Holy fire!
Oh, and now that everyone's awake, 23 minutes left in the race. It's just about 9:50 p.m. in sim time. The weather has absolutely been perfect. The track conditions, maybe not. A lot of cars slip sliding around. Some have taken tires, some have not taken tires. We'll see how that plays out. Jan Climbs is behind Aaron Trout here right now and looks to be the faster of the two for the time being. But we've seen being the lead car, Sarah, often means that you dictate how the battle goes.
Very true. It's one of the benefits of being able to have that clean air in front of you, being able to disrupt the drivers behind you by making, you know, little choices here and there to disrupt their own, to kind of prevent them from towing on you. And just, I am just flabbergasted at the ability for Dylan Tan to drive. Just blowing away the competition. But here we go. Look at this here. We have Stefano, who's managed to get himself up into 15th, despite having a bit of a smash up earlier. He's bringing himself up on Louis Alexander right now, and it just... I'm watching them. I'm going to see how well they do by the end of this race.
They certainly are on the attack. That looked a bit early on that they were on a bit of the defensive. Of course, they had that spin as well, didn't they? And I think that was in the Tremonto corner earlier on in the race. But they have rebounded from that and now inside the top 15 looking for more. And if they can get by Sebastian Louis Alexander, there's nothing stopping them from joining the fight between O'Brien, Death, and the like. As they're all coming back together, there might be, Tim, a huge fight for the last spot inside the top 10 as Jan Climbs has got a 5-second penalty. Tim, do you know anything about that?
I imagine that will be the incident we saw earlier. I'm just going to look at the steward's report on that now. Yeah, it's an incident on lap 23, turn 7. It was involving the 999, the 329 car. And there was, of course, the 5 seconds for Jan Climbs there due to forcing them off the track. But they did return the position, so that meant that the penalty wasn't as bad. But I was going to say, Jan Climbs, one of the drivers that went into the pits, didn't take... the fresh set of tyres. It meant that they gained that 5 seconds. One of the many drivers that did that. However, now with the 5-second penalty, that is all going to be undone. So the positions they gained because of that are now just going to be returned.
I had completely forgotten about that. That is literally like putting money in the bank and then taking it right back out again. Absolutely nothing gained by doing that. Now, keep in mind, unlike a drive-through penalty, Jan Climbs is not required to come to pit lane and serve that. That just gets added on to the end of race time. So wherever they finish, it'll be plus 5 seconds for the Verva Racing Porsche at the end of the day. Other things going on the racetrack, a double rainbow, if you will, happening at the top of the scoring pylon. Dylan Tan and Valentin Berrier have tied for the quickest lap of the race, as rare as a double rainbow, but just as glorious. 2 identical times down to the 1,000th of a second. Incredible, sir.
It's absolutely crazy. It's not very often that we get a chance to see just 2 drivers match up with just near identical runs. It's just, even I'm like, I've seen a lot of stuff over the last year of racing, and I've yet to see a double purple in ACC before. Just crazy. How about you, Tim?
I've yet to see it, but I think it just goes to show how good these drivers are and what level they're all at, both Valentin Berrier and Tan, getting the exact same time, and it's a very fast one. At that, I believe their best laps are at 1:32.927, so to show that they can both get it, it just goes to show the level of the driving out here and how tight the top of this field is. Of course, Valentin Berrier down in third, still chasing several here. Will want to catch up before the end of the race. No, that gap isn't getting smaller. What's happened there, Jesse?
I think that was a BMW. I think that might have been Louis Alexander, perhaps. I'm unsure. That was a 13? No, that wasn't the 13 car, surely. Whatever car that was, I believe that was them attempting to not be in the way, but that definitely looked a bit more scary than it actually was, I'm pretty sure. By the way, folks at home wondering how we keep score, this is a little RCI lore for you. The very first week of RCI's existence years ago, we had 2 drivers tie for the quickest lap. We didn't even know it was possible up until that point. and we had an internal debate on what the rules were. Apparently, the rules are the first driver to set that lap gets credit for the bonus points and the fastest lap.
Oh, there was a bit of a touch there between, I think, the number 41 and the number 98 car. Didn't catch the entire thing of what happened, but it looks like a bit of a missed brake on the corner caused the car to slightly tap it. It wasn't like huge or anything, Jesse, but just unsettled the cars a little bit. Could this be handing to the fact that now, as we get into the later stage of the race, those who didn't take the fresh set of tyres are now going to begin to lose quite a lot of grip quite dramatically, and as we go into the final 17 minutes here, cars are going to start sliding around. They're not going to have enough grip to the corners, and overall track speeds, although they've not got a lot of fuel left in the car, the overall lap times are going to be a lot slower now as drivers just try to make sure they avoid those drive-through penalties and or incidents.
Well, it's all coming back together. By the way, for those of you wondering, Valentin Berrier set that same identical fast lap first. They would be credited with the bonus points here today, further keeping their championship hopes alive. Sarah, it's coming down to it. We're getting into the final 20 minutes, the final 17 minutes now. Several cars coming together, all fighting over a coveted top 10 spot. I always said, what's better than saying you finished 11th? Saying you finished inside the top 10.
Absolutely, absolutely. Being able to finish top 10 in such a hotly contested series is something every driver should be proud of. And there's something I've always said that I've always ascribed to as a driver is the best thing you can do is finish the race. Everything after that is gravy. But in the case of these drivers, they want something so much more than that. And they're just going to keep pushing until they get it.
Absolutely true. I 100% agree with you there. You saw Agner Radikov have a successful defense between them and Eric Stefano, getting very close between the two of them, but keeping it clean there. That also might have been an overtake, I was just told, between the two of them. Agner Radikov getting a spot back. They're all so close together, hard to tell. Louis Alexander right up in front of them as well. Sasha Death just in front of that group we were previously looking at, right behind Peter O'Brien, fighting over 12th place, who again, O'Brien's fighting Climbs. Climbs is fighting Aaron Trout. One false move could be mega here, Tim.
Yeah, this is where all the drivers need to make sure they are on their top performance, which of course they always are, but here comes the Mercedes looking down the inside. Actually, I think that's a blue flag.
Is it a double? No, I don't think it is. It's definitely not a blue flag.
Both the Mercedes and I think the McLaren there coming through on the BMW, and that is a double overtake. That's really going to be something hard to deal with, especially this late on the race, to be overtaken double it. Oh, there's an instant there as well. It looks like as cars start to slow down. The McLaren, they're going very, very slowly, letting through. I think the Porsche came through there, and they're letting through the BMW as well. So maybe something happened there.
Louis Alexander and Stefano got together, Tim.
Oh, is that what happened?
Yeah, it sure was. I felt the mounting tension. I felt like that was coming, and there it was. They got side by side, and they got strung back out single file. But I do fear that Stefano may have gotten into the back of Louis Alexander to cause that. Of course, Stefano let off and allowed Louis Alexander to go back through, but some of that damage done now as Sasha Death, Agner Radikov, Fry, they're all through here.
Yeah, that's helped a lot of cars to come through, because of course that's the other thing. When everyone's bunched up this much, when the fight is this close, one small mistake at the front is going to mean a lot of positions lost. We saw it there as one car got swallowed up by two, and it's just going to happen. So let's say now Climbs has a slight instant, they go off track, they could be losing 4 or 5 positions, and that's really going to hurt. As I said, especially this late on the race, it's not when you want it to happen, although it often, when it does happen. So this is why all those drivers that have not taken fresh set of tyres, they need to be extra careful right now, because one small mistake could be a big deficit.
Sarah, you're seeing a lot of sins here. Is this drivers getting desperate, or is this just late race push? Some drivers on different strategies. What's going on here is causing this chaos effect?
I gotta say, it's very likely that drivers are starting to get really desperate. This is the penultimate race. This is the one where they're running out of chances to get that last bit of push in. They need to just put it all on the table today and try to get the most they can out of Misano, because if they don't, that's the end of the season. They're going to look back at this race and go, I wish I pushed a little more into that corner. I wish I had taken that risk just a little bit more here.
And also, too, considering the different strategy, they're all close enough to each other to feel like that's viable, isn't it, really? That they can get those extra positions.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Close racing here as we ride on board Igor Ognarodikov, Simware.Pro number 41 Mercedes, the only Mercedes in the field, and they've got a front row seat to what appears to be a 9-round prize fight boxing ring match going on. They've got O'Brien. This is the rear wing from O'Brien looking back at Ognorodikov's car, who still, by the way, has Sasha Death behind them. All these cars together, all fighting for the top 10. After the contact earlier, Jan climbs in P10. Aaron Trout now back to 11th place. O'Brien trying to get by Aaron Trout. Ognorodikov, Death all here in a line. And if they don't get this sorted out, whomever the fastest is in front quick enough, keep in mind, Michael Herman Fry in 15th place. They're 4.9 seconds out. I know there's only 12 minutes, but trust me on this. If they continue to battle like this, it will take no time for Fry to catch up, Tim.
Yeah, they need to be aware how much time this is taking out of their lap time, just to make sure, like you said, that Fry doesn't catch up here. Here we go. We're watching from the rear of O'Brien as the Mercedes just all over the rear of that McLaren there. Still slightly threatened behind by Death and the Aston, but that was very, very close. And when it gets this tight, you've got to be really alert as to what's happening. You need to make sure you're braking with plenty of time. Oh, someone's going for a ride there. It looked like Ognorodikov going round too wide on that final corner. And that is a place you have to be careful. We have seen now, I think that's twice in a row, that Mercedes got really wide on that final corner. You've got the raised curbs there, and if you hit them wrong, they can spit out your car and just completely ruin the race. So getting lucky twice and not to lose everything from going wide on the final corner, Jesse.
This is so very close here. That might have been a little tap from Ognorodikov. No harm, no foul. O'Brien trying to stay in front, doing just enough to do that, but some absolute mega drama. Stefano has got themselves a drive-through penalty, as so has third place Valentin Berrier, who was contesting this championship at that drive-through, might take them out of the entire championship equation. They might still get the quickest lap bonus points, but it will be to no avail today. I'm pretty confident in saying that in the 721's place, that is a drive-through for track limits, and here it is, 90, car 98, 15-second penalty for taking out car 311 position return. We saw the aftermath of that. We sort of expected that, of course. But Valentin Berrier, that is a track limits warning. I think that takes, or track limits penalty rather, that takes us up to 4, I'm pretty sure, which still means you two were right, much to my chagrin. Sarah, your thoughts here. Final 10 minutes, it's all kicking off.
Absolutely just soul crushing to see Berrier with this drive-through penalty. It literally shows that choosing to have that drop round, if you can handle it or you can manage to not have that drop round, you really need to avoid it, because this is obviously the race you would have preferred to use as drop round after all of this. It's just deeply, deeply rough there. He'd been pushing this whole time, managing to tie with the double purple, just shocking everybody, but sadly, Misano claims yet another. And it looks like we've gotten past my amount there, so we're up to 5 drive-through penalties so far.
Oh my
This course
goodness.
is taking no holds are barred on this one.
Absolutely the truth, and the worst part was for Berrier is they had caught Seville, and a huge sin by Igor Ognorodikov up the inside. You almost felt like Aaron Trout let that happen, saw him coming, realized he wasn't going to be denied. Igor Ognorodikov through up into P11. They have 1.3 seconds to get back to Jan Climbs. It's 9 minutes. I think it might be doable for a fast car, but holy smokes, after laps of following, it's a big ol' send up the Tremonto, but it has worked, and it was clean for the 41 Simware.Pro driver. Tim, what a pass.
That was beautiful. Ognorodikov here really making things happen in the final 10 minutes of this race. They are up into P10 as well because Kleins has that 5-second penalty, assuming that they don't pick up one themselves, but just making things happen. They've done some beautiful overtakes over the last couple of laps, always on that throttle coming out of corners, really sending it as deep as they can and as well, waiting to that last second to brake, but also every single one has been done pretty much safely as well. I don't think I've seen any bits of contact coming out of the number 41 car there. So to be able to be that alert to your surroundings, as well as just climbing that quickly, you've got to hand it to Ognorodikov here. It's been a really good drive in the final 10 minutes.
Folks, it's all coming undone. Drive-through penalty. Car 991, Konstantin Soldatov out of 8th place. Drive-through penalty for, you guessed it, track limits. Unless I am very much mistaken, that certainly looks like a track limits penalty. And that is number 6 according to our tally. And it just keeps getting worse. This night turning into a nightmare for some, Sarah.
Absolutely. It's kind of like the Smash Mouth song goes. It just, they don't stop coming, and they don't stop coming, and they don't stop coming.
That might be the first recorded Smash Mouth reference in the history of RCI broadcasting. Congratulations, you're an all-star.
Do I get a little plaque for it? I really hope I get a little plaque.
I'll see if we can't make that happen. We're not making light of the situation, of course. It is very serious stuff. Several cars getting self-inflicted drive-throughs, admittedly, here, Tim. Lack of concentration? Is it just used up too much early? What's going on? What's causing this?
I mean, I'm going to say it. They're all on really old tyres now. Most of them, and there's another showcase of what old tyres does to a car, but they've been driving on the same set of tyres for an hour now, Jesse. Most of these cars anyway. Some of them have changed up, but most cars have been driving on the same set of tyres for an hour. It's a track anyway, which is notoriously known for being very harsh on track limits. It's very easy to pick up track cuts around here. It's just one of those things where cars are becoming a lot more unstable. It's hard to drive. You've been driving for an hour now. You're getting into that final 5 minutes that Sarah was talking about earlier. It is all starting to pile along, so these mistakes do begin to happen. I personally thought that drivers would be going a lot more careful at this point to avoid the track limits. However, you can see from having so many cars bunched up like this, so many fights still happening around the track, that in the moment, all of these drive-throughs are going to keep on pouring through, because you've got too much to think about almost, and there's a lot now to juggle. So it gets to the point where these cars, they've got to be so alert, and sometimes these things just happen. Track limits pick up. It's very easy to do around Misano, and I think today we can all say that we knew something was going to happen with lots of track cuts, minus you, Jesse, who thought there'd be one.
Yeah, you keep bringing that up. It's interesting. Chat did not appreciate our Smash Mouth interlude, Sarah. I liked it personally. I was a huge fan of that myself. Soldatov, you saw coming down the lane to serve their drive-through penalty. You worry how many more it could happen to. If it's happened to 2 or 3 of them inside the top 10, it could happen to literally anyone. Barrier, of course, served their drive-through penalty for track limits, and that dropped them down from 3rd to 6th place. There might be a little bit of a silver lining here. Kieran Patterson right in front of them, and they are gaining just a bit, though with less than 5 minutes to go, it might prove a bridge too far. And this race might prove to be the race where Dylan Tan became champion-elect as well, just not making a mistake, but still, drive-through penalties looming. It could happen to anyone for going off the track. This has been an excellent fight between Peter O'Brien and this entire field. You get Sasha Death in there. O'Brien trying to get around Aaron Trout. Sasha Death looked like they may have an opportunity to get one up the inside. They didn't, as they all end up back in single file line. But for how long? With the laps winding down, with the time dwindling on the clock, Death going to the inside here. Gets, I think, a little pinched off there. Has to settle for the position. No, still in there with the nose. In there is Sasha Death. Has their nose in there. Preferred line for O'Brien. O'Brien covers off again. Excellent racing. Huge curve from Death, and they save it.
That is a great save from Death there. That could have gone very, very south very, very quickly. And I mean, that's just a lot of aggression coming out of Def this late on. They've clearly got pace here. Sarah, do you think that they can do anything with it? Do you see Def climbing through the order now, or after that instance of hitting the curve, do you think that maybe it's getting to the point where the tyres just aren't going to allow it?
I think we're getting to the point where they're sure going to try to push those tires to their last little dregs, but I don't see the competitors out of them giving up much. They've been fighting this whole race to maintain their positions. It's going to be hard to see any sort of changes before the end of the race, but you know, like right here, we're having the driver go a little bit wide there. It's so exhilarating to reach this last minute though, when the confluence of driver fatigue and desire reach this kind of climax where drivers are going to try to make moves they wouldn't have all race, and then, you know, we'll just find out what happens, I guess.
Do keep in mind, Aaron Stefano has a drive-through penalty, but they parked their car some time ago in the pit lane. They've not officially retired, but to get points, you have to have run 85% of the leader's laps, and unfortunately that will not extend to the 98 tonight. 17 cars looking to get points tonight, and a couple of those positions very much still unsettled. Peter O'Brien, the O'Brien Racing McLaren, still trying to get by Thomas. Aaron Trout, Sasha Death regrouping, and looming large in the background behind Death's car is Michael Herman Fry, who's had a bit of an adventure tonight as well, looking to gain a few more spots before the end of this, and we have seen it happen already. Agner Rodikov was inside the top 5, got sent back to P10 or around that. They've gained a few spots back on that. Kieran Patterson inside the top 5 in the 123. The tires doing the trick for that car for the time being, trying to hold off Valentin Berrier, who is tied for the quickest lap thus far. Seville's had a quiet race. They're going to get credit for P2. Dylan Tan, again, just a brilliant job, Tim. What can you say?
That they've driven perfectly from start to finish in this race. Of course, they started on pole position, so that's going to be more points for them. If they can put out a faster lap now, then they'll get points against Valentin Barrier, but as it goes, Valentin Barrier will still pick up the points for fastest lap. But winning the race, Dylan Tan, I don't think I've seen them set foot wrong in this race at all. They've not had a drive-through penalty. They've clearly been sticking to the track, although they had all that space to make sure they don't cut the track, but just looking so confident in that McLaren, Dylan Tan, and they do deserve this win based on that. Although they've not had to fight anyone, they've just been confident from start to finish. Personally, I'm really impressed with Seville as well. I thought at the beginning there was a risk of them getting swallowed up a little bit, especially by Hugo Morales and Valentin Barrier, as they try and battle it out, because those two were eager to fight through. A couple of cars going wide out the corner there in the final few laps. But yeah, even with them eager to get through, Seville held their own. They came cleanly through the first set of corners in the first lap, and then they've just driven their race and they've done well. They're going to bring home a second, which is a really good result for the 97.
This is going to be close to the line. Will Dylan Tan let off and try to run the clock out, or will we get another lap? I don't think he will. We will get an additional lap here. One more lap of racing. And Sarah, while we have the time, I'm curious what you think. We debated early on as another move here. Sasha Death looking down to the inside, blocked off by Aaron Trout. Aaron Trout with a huge defensive line. Defensive all the way down into the corner. Death goes wide. Death looking to do the over-under undercut, but nothing happening there. Aaron Trout, a little bit of a wiggle though. Will that mean Death has an opportunity to go around the inside or the outside? No, not quite the spin. Oh, a big block there by Aaron Trout as Death can't quite squeeze into the gap. Very wisely backs off Michael Herman Fry up into the mix as well. And while we have a short breather, Sarah Stan, what do you think was the right call in pit lane, to take tires or to not take tires?
I mean, without being, I can't see the data of which drivers took tires, but I still stick by my guns that taking tires is probably the right choice. There's so much sliding on this track. If you took in tires to the end, I still think that you probably, it would have cost you a little more than it was worth. But wow, that was some battle. Just absolutely nearly sending it several times. Amazing.
The worst part, or the best part, depending on how you look at it, is those drivers have one more lap to go. They hadn't even started the final lap of the race yet. Dylan Tan has done a dominant drive tonight. They've been the dominant driver for the majority of the season. This is not enough to clinch the championship ahead of the final round next week, but it will be enough to make him the front runner, and by a mile. The Legion of Racers driver, Dylan Tan, wins again.
Way to go, Dylan. Absolute amazing drive today. Should be really proud of yourself.
Yeah, it was a brilliant drive from Dylan Tan, heavily deserving that top spot. Seville comes in second place. Hugo Morales will round out the podium. And now we've got a big fight coming on our hands. Solstoff, who has a drive-through penalty, trying to hold off O'Brien and Aaron Chow as they both come through the corner. It looks like the Mercedes now going down the inside will have it and will come through. That's Ognorotov up, keeping up into P9 here. O'Brien still lacking behind the number 10, just trying to find a way through into that top 10 position in the final parts of the race, but for now it's all going to sort itself out going to the final couple of corners. O'Brien goes to a huge send down the inside there of Aston Martin, still on the inside, a little bit of contact. Now the others are coming as well. Aaron Chow looking for a way around the outside, not able to find a way through though, as both cars are currently taking up the track. Looks like O'Brien's still there, coming round the outside of the final
it's going to be a drag race!
They send it around the final corner. Do they have enough to stick to it? The 991 CC backing outside.
Oh, big crash!
To the end of the track. Someone's gone up in the background, and who is in front? I think it was O'Brien. It was O'Brien by a tenth of a second. Solderstuff will come down in 11th place. Aaron Chow in 12th. And Fry will come in 13th. And who was that, Jesse, that went off at the end there?
That was such a death. I'm pretty sure they got clouded off of the racetrack, and we'll have to see what the stewards say about that, pending post-race stewarding. I hate having to say that, but what a race finish it was. A deserving podium, surely. Some thrills, spills, and chills tonight. Some drivers taking tires, some not. A copious amount of drive-through penalties for track limits, as you would expect around Misano, as per usual, and some fantastic racing coming down to a drag race at the finish line. Welcome to RCI. If it was your first race, it is usually par for the course. Brilliant racing today sets up a finale race in 1 week's time. We would love to have you with us as we go to the Nürburgring to determine a champion. Right now, it's looking like it's Dylan Tan's to lose, but they are not safe. They can still lose it to the likes of Hugo Merrils and Valentin Berrier, 3 drivers alive in the championship for the final race. What more could you possibly ask for? Sarah Stant, final thoughts on today's race.
We saw some drivers who are deeply competitive make a lot of really risky choices that for some it worked out and some it didn't. But overall, we saw some of the absolute best racing we could have seen on Misano today. I'm glad to have been able to watch it.
Tim Peck, it was a race that saw significant contact towards the end and a lot of side-by-side racing. It looked like a by-the-books Misano for me. Curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I mean, that is how Misano usually goes here at RCI. It was a great race throughout, though. Dylan Tan, of course, pulling away at the beginning, helping them to just secure that victory early on. Same with Seville, but we saw some great racing throughout. Hugo Morales and Valentin Berrier really battled it out. It's a shame that Berrier picked up that drive-through, send them down to 6th, but they will still keep the fastest lap award, and just some great racing in the pack overall. We've seen trains of up to 5-6 people at some points, and Ognorodotov just coming through top speed. I mean, there's some brilliant drives all around from a lot of drivers there. If I was any of those guys, I'd be feeling like I achieved something today.
Being told by an eagle-eyed chatter that maybe Sasha Death went off on their own accord and had no contact with another car. I do apologize if that was the case. Dark, hard to see, and exciting nonetheless. Unfortunate for the off, regardless of how they got there, but just trying to pass along additional information that we may have, of course. Well, if you liked that and you want to get involved in RCI racing, well, we've got a place you can go, racerci.com, and sign up to any of our championships currently ongoing. We've got I believe the Thursday Champ Night Owl starts tomorrow night, of course. No stream for that, but the racing will still be as hot as ever. And of course, Friday Champ coming to a close. Hey, if you want to join them for the final race, you can. Mid-season signups are allowed. Do your pre-qualifying during the week. Get involved. RaceRCI.com for a complete schedule of all the races. Do bear in mind iRacing events starting in just about a week. The Charlotte 75. It's pro stock cars around Charlotte Motor Speedway, and still time to sign up for that race and the other several races, the Okayama race, I'm pretty sure, and of course the first ever RCI series GT4, and I'm pretty sure, what was the other car? The MX5 Cup cars, multi-class racing in that series. If you're trying to get into iRacing or maybe trying to join league racing for iRacing, we have more information about how you can do that with us at racerci.com. Of course, that's not a complete, comprehensive list of all the things we've got going on, because my goodness, there are a million of them. And as a general reminder, of course, RCI's first big esports series event, or series, I should say, coming at you this year. There's still time to sign up your team and at your chance to win. Oh God, what is the prize pool up to now for that event? It's confirmed to be at 10,000 euros at the time of this broadcast. And it can still expand past that. We started out with 8,000. It's grown. It's 10,000 euros minimum prize pool. Sign your team up. Get involved. You don't want to be left out. It's RCI's eSports series coming to you this spring. We want to see you on the racetrack for that. And of course, if that's not your style, we have the community events running alongside that series as well that you can sign up for as well. As always, racerci.com. Join and check out everything we're doing. It is a lot. A big thank you to our partners that make this race and every race possible. AK Esports is a leader in esports management and competitions around the world. For more on their services and how they can provide them to you, visit akesports.it. Digital Motorsports has all the top brands and is your one-stop stop for everything sim racing. Whether you're in need of a new rim or a whole new rig, from beginner to expert, Digital Motorsports has something for everyone. Visit the link in the description, and don't forget to try out their sim rig builder, where you can build your very own sim rig from the ground up. Driver 61 is helping sim racers fulfill their potential on the racetrack. From one-on-one driver coaching to full-on driving courses, the folks over at Driver 61 have helped thousands of racers refine their craft and unlock their untapped potential. RCI viewers can enjoy 25% off driver coaching by using the discount code in the description of the video. Thank you, Driver 61. Go Setups provides expertly made ACC setups, I should say, for all skill levels. Built by some of the fastest professional esports drivers and sim racing engineers, Go Setups provides both fully tailored esports setups as well as safer alternatives that anyone can drive. Visit the link in the description to browse their premium setup shop today. And finally, but definitely not least, Fanatec. They're a global leader in high-end sim racing hardware. From load cell pedals to direct drive bases, Fanatec strives for quality in every piece of hardware they design. You can help RCI by using our affiliate link when making purchases of Fanatec hardware at fanatec.com. Thank you so much for those of you that have used the affiliate link and the affiliate link for the Go Setups as well. We see you using it, and we are very much appreciative of you doing exactly that. Tim Peck, one race left to go. Dylan Tan's, it looks like it's Dylan Tan's to lose, if we're completely honest. Expectations for the finale?
Absolutely anything can happen. It's around the Nürburgring, correct me if I'm wrong, and it's one of those tracks where there's just so much potential for a lot of different styles of driving. You've got the ability to overtake and the ability to really put out some good laps as well. So going into that final round, I expect things are still going to remain heated. Whether it's at the top or in the mid-pack, I'm very excited to see how it turns out next week.
Sarah Stant joined us for the very first time here on RCI. It is obviously an honor to have the Queen of Kvetch with us in the booth, but I'm just curious, what were your thoughts your first time out with RCI?
Absolutely amazing fun. it's great being able to work with such amazing professional people and just seeing such a crazy race just take place in front of us. And I have to agree on the next race, the Nürburgring is going to be an amazing track. We got a lot of Porsches out there right now, and the Porsche excels at the Nürburgring. So I think we might see a little bit of shakeup in like the mid to lower areas.
Well, it's definitely a pleasure to have you, and I echo that sentiment. Finally, before we sign off tonight, let's take a look at the updated championship standings as we will enter the final race in 1 week. The updated standings, here it is. Dylan Tan, 278 points. Valentin Barrier holds on to second place by a single point, 218. That is getting dangerously close to insurmountable. And you've got Hugo Merrill's 1 point behind in third place. Definitely the fight for the podium spots is still well and truly on. Samir Foch in fourth place, 189 points. Not out of that fight either for a podium spot. Cody Sherritt, 180. And that's your top five. Outside of that, Jonathan Seville and the rest of the grid, you can see they're still very close. Wouter Billen and Solensev tied there as well. As, still everything to play for in the final week of the season. Set a reminder, you're not going to want to miss it. And, of course, probably some announcements on the upcoming Friday Champ coming up next week as well, if you are interested in getting involved with that series. But on behalf of everyone here at RCI, from the admins to the broadcast team to the stewards, we thank you all for watching today's broadcast. I've been Jesse Lee, joined by Tim Peck and Sarah Stant, with Ryan Gill behind the cameras for the last time this Friday championship. We thank all of you for joining us, and until next time, have a good night.